Well, it shouldn't be our life goal, because there are times in your life when you're not going to be happy. And then what are you going to do? Your goal is demolished. And there are going to be plenty of times in your life when you're not happy. There might be years. And so it's a shallow boat in a very rough ocean. And it's based upon a misconceptualization. Happiness is something that descends upon you. Everyone knows that. You know, it comes upon you suddenly. And then you should be grateful for it, because there's plenty of suffering. And if you happen to be happy, well, wonderful. Enjoy it. Be grateful for it. And maybe try to meditate on the reasons that it manifested itself, right? Because it can come as a mystery, you know. You don't necessarily know when you're going to be happy. Something surprising happens and delights you. And you can analyze that. You can think, well, I'm doing something right. I'm in the right place right now. I've done something right. Maybe I can hang on to that. Maybe I can learn from that. What you should be pursuing instead is, well, there's two things. You should be pursuing who you could be. That'd be the first thing. It's like, because you're not who you could be, and you know it. You have guilt and shame and regret, and you berate yourself for your lack of discipline and your procrastination and all your bad habits. You know perfectly well that you're not who you could be. And God only knows who you could be. And so that's how you should be that's what you should be striving for. And associated with that, you should be attempting to formulate some conception of the highest good that you can conceive of, that you can articulate. Because why not aim for that? It's like your life is short and it's troublesome. And perhaps you need to do something worthwhile with it. And if so, then you should do the most worthwhile thing. And you should figure out what that is for you. And part of that's definitely going to be to develop your character as much as possible, to dispense with those parts of you that are unworthy. And then maybe, if you're fortunate and you do that carefully, then happiness will descend upon you from time to time. And that's the best you've got. And then also perhaps during sorrowful times, or worse, evil times, the fact that you've strengthened your character and that you're aiming at the highest that you can conceptualize, that'll give you the moral fortitude to endure without becoming corrupted during those times, and to be someone who can be relied upon in a crisis. There's an aim. You know, one of the things I've told my audience is, the young guys take to this a lot. I said, you should be the strongest person at your father's funeral, right? Well, that's something to aim for. It's a transition, a generational transition, and it means that, well, all the people around you are suffering because of their loss. They have someone to turn to who can illustrate by their behavior that the force of character is sufficient to move you beyond the catastrophe. And you need that. And that's a great thing to hypothesize as your aim. And happiness just evaporates as irrelevant in light of that sort of conceptualization.
So how do you actually become the strongest person at your father's funeral? What are the steps? And is it always about being mission driven?
Well, the mission is the improvement of your character, the constant improvement of your character. And I think a lot of that's done in dialogue with your conscience. It's like your conscience is always telling you. Socrates said this thousands of years ago. Your conscience is always telling you what you shouldn't be doing. And one of the things Socrates said was what discriminated him from the run-of-the-mill person, and why perhaps we still know of him so many thousands of years later, was that when his conscience told him not to do something, he didn't do it. He stopped saying the things that he shouldn't have been saying, and he stopped doing the things he shouldn't have been doing. And that's a start, you know. That's a discipline, I would say. That's the ability to follow a certain kind of intrinsic discipline. And maybe that's merely the cessation of evil. That's not exactly the same as the pursuit of positive good. Let's say you haven't got there yet, but that's a start. You You clear away the obstacles from your vision by ceasing to engage in those activities you know to be wrong. And then the world starts to lay itself out in more pristine form. And then maybe you can start to apprehend what would be positively good instead of merely not wrong. I mean, not wrong is a good start.
When your needs align with what society needs you to do for it, then you're doing the right thing, probably for yourself.
Well, that's how it seems. I mean, it seems then like you found your niche, right? It's where you and what you have to offer fit. And, you know, I think of people as beasts of burden in some sense, like we're built for a burden. And we're not happy without that burden, and we want to find the one that suits us. And that's difficult. It's part of the adventure of life to seek out the burden that suits you. But when you have that, then yes, then hopefully you're operating in harmony with the requirements of those around you. You know, you're functioning well, your family's functioning well, you're contributing to your community. What you're doing is worthwhile, you know. You're not tormented by your conscience. You're aiming at something that the sacrifices that you have to make that clearly justify the sacrifices you have to make. Maybe even the sacrifice of your life, because you're in this, like this is a mortal game. You're in this with your whole life. And you'd think that what that would mean, at least in part, is that you need to find a game to play that's of sufficient grandeur and nobility so that perhaps even the fact that mortality is built into the structure now becomes justifiable. I mean, it's a hell of an ambition, but it doesn't seem to me to be something that's impossible. I think you can live your life enough so that it justifies itself despite its limitation. That's the real question. Can you do that? And I believe that you can, and I believe that what that means is that the human spirit fundamentally triumphs over death. You certainly don't have anything better to do than that, as far as I can tell.